The CDC trying to get to the bottom of a parasitic infection causing sickness in Texas and other parts of the country. The latest today on the Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm David Brown. The current spike in gastrointestinal illness has hit Texas, New York, Illinois, and Michigan the hardest so far. We'll hear what medical experts say about the dangers, possible causes, and recommendations to stay healthy. Many Texans might think of fire ants as Texan as bluebonnets, but they don't remember the war against them, echoed in the more recent fight against the screwworm. We'll hear the backstory. Also, on the heels of Independence Day weekend, a fashion magazine turns to classic images of Texas for inspiration and celebration. Those stories and a whole lot more today on the Texas Standard. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on this 6th day of July. Hope your Independence Day weekend was a good one. Not so great for many of our fellow Americans up and down the eastern seaboard, where the heat created disruption at July 4th events, forcing widespread cancellations. Here in the Lone Star State, conditions were much closer to typical July weather. By now, most of us know the routine for this time of year. We watch the thermometer, we bring along lots of water, do what we can for the mosquitoes, and think twice about how long the potato salad's been sitting in the sun. But as you may have heard, there's something else more serious public health officials are watching, and none of the aforementioned precautions are likely to have much effect. Texas is one of at least 17 states and one of the hardest hit by an intestinal parasite known as cyclospora. Investigators at the Centers for Disease Control still haven't identified the source, and while this intestinal bug seems to be rarely life-threatening, it can make people miserable for days or even weeks. The good news is this isn't the kind of illness easily passed from person to person. For more, we're joined by Dr. Catherine Troisi, a professor of epidemiology at UT Health Houston School of Public Health. Dr. Troisi, welcome back.
Thank you.
What do we know about this parasite, and how does this illness compare to what one might consider a run-of-the-mill stomach bug?
So we know that we are seeing an increased number of cases of cyclospora. The disease is called cyclosporiasis. We do see this every summer. It's spread through contaminated food and water. This outbreak seems, as I said, we're seeing more cases than we usually see, widespread throughout the country, and it's usually linked to one food source, contaminated spinach, raspberries, cilantro. But we don't know what this is linked to. In fact, we think that it's not just one source, contaminated food source. It may be several.
I'm reluctant to do this. Don't know whether folks are eating or anything right now, so heads up here, folks. But the symptom that's getting the headlines is explosive diarrhea. What distinguishes this illness in terms of the symptoms, and when should someone call a doctor instead of just trying to ride it out?
So watery diarrhea, explosive diarrhea is the most common symptom. Also, lots of appetite, weight loss, cramping and bloating associated with the diarrhea. You may have nausea and fatigue. If you are sick, it is important to contact your healthcare provider because the illness can be treated with antibiotics, and left untreated, particularly in the elderly, the very young, people with immunocompromising diseases, it can be quite serious. Although, as you mentioned, deaths are rare.
In terms of spread, I mentioned that this isn't spread, for instance, from person to person. But I think people may be wondering, practically speaking, what can I do to lower the likelihood that I could get hit by this parasite? What would you tell them?
Yeah, there are a couple things you can do. One is to wash your hands when you're cooking. Even fresh fruits and vegetables, wash your hands. I mean, you should always do that. So that should be a given. When you are preparing raw foods, and I should mention that heating does kill the parasite, so it's really uncooked food that we're concerned about. Wash fruit and vegetables under running water. It may help to use a little bit of lemon juice or vinegar, something acidic, to wash the fruits and vegetables. You can buy in the store pre-washed lettuce and salads, and they say that you don't need to wash it. I would suggest maybe do it again just to be sure. If you are cutting up melons and cantaloupe, wash the outside, the rind of the fruits, so that when you cut it, the knife doesn't carry whatever's on the outside into the flesh of the fruit. And when you're preparing these fruits and vegetables, cut away any damaged or bruised areas of it. This is not going to 100% protect you, but it's a good start.
I was thinking, since this does seem to be so closely linked to produce, we don't know for sure. It could be water, for example. But if you're an average Texan, you're going out to buy groceries today, is there anything you should do differently, or is washing produce and taking these steps that you describe enough?
Well, again, it's not 100% guaranteed, particularly with fruits like raspberries, how they're faceted, and the parasite can hide in those cracks and crevices. In fact, we've had outbreaks in Houston due to contaminated raspberries. Typically, these foods, not always, but typically are imported from other countries. And so if you wanted to be really, if you are really concerned about this, particularly if you're at high risk, those groups I mentioned, you might want to avoid imported foods. But that's difficult nowadays. A lot of our food is imported.
We've been speaking with Dr. Catherine Troisi, a professor of epidemiology at UT Health Houston School of Public Health. Dr. Troisi, thank you so much for this update and the practical tips. We certainly do appreciate it.
Nice to talk to you.
When applied to weeds, the herbicide known as dicamba can be highly effective, but it is also highly controversial because it can drift in the wind, affecting crops miles away, and there's been a tug-of-war over liability and regulation. As Harvest Public Media's Will Bauer reports, the EPA released new rules earlier this year, but there are serious doubts over how effective those rules will be.
On Kevin Johnson's farm in eastern Illinois near the Indiana border, weeds can be a really big issue. He and his family grow corn and soybeans, and they care a lot about the soil. Instead of tilling the field to kill weeds, Johnson relies on a mixture of herbicides, including dicamba.
We have to have every tool in the toolbox. Weeds are not getting easier to kill.
Dicamba is a potent weed killer, but the problem with this herbicide is that some crops are extremely sensitive to it. Grapes, tomatoes, and some trees can all be killed. Even soybeans and cotton that have not been genetically modified are at risk. Dicamba can drift in the wind, and after it's been sprayed above a certain temperature, it can vaporize and travel for miles. Aaron Hager is a weed science professor at the University of Illinois.
It's never really a question about if we'll see the symptomology of off-target movement. We just don't know how extensive it'll be because we can't really predict what the temperature is going to be.
And that's why Hager says dicamba can be such a contentious topic, even among farmers.
The dicamba mindset among end users or non-end users was like the 2016 presidential election. You were in one camp or the other, and if you weren't in my camp, you were wrong.
The EPA calls the new regulations for spraying dicamba on cotton and soybeans the strongest ever. Hager says in some ways they are stricter. For example, they don't allow dicamba to be sprayed if it's hotter than 95 degrees. But the EPA also dropped rules that prevented it from being applied after June. Purdue University weed scientist Tommy Butts says farmers need to control weeds, but he has mixed feelings about dicamba.
We have to do certain strategies to reduce drift, which are really important, but then that's also shooting our weed control in the foot, and so we're losing here too. So that's why I say I always have a love-hate relationship with it right now, because we're stuck in the middle with a lot of balancing acts, and there's no good answer across the board.
Even outside the agricultural community, dicamba can be a problem. In some rural towns, the signs of dicamba drift are apparent if you know where to look.
Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
In a public park in Tilden, Illinois, Kim Ernst-Pitcher has noticed the leaves on the bur oak trees are curled and cupped around the edges.
They're also just misshapen. You can see that even some of the tips are folded and some of them are severely stunted.
Art Pitcher is the director of ecological health for Prairie Rivers Network, a conservation nonprofit. She's been documenting drift damage across Illinois for 9 years now. She says dicamba stresses trees and even kills others. Previous iterations of the EPA rules, called labels, have been shot down in federal court, and Art Pitcher doesn't expect these new rules to break the cycle.
Over and over, the courts have dealt with this issue, and we've had extremely technical, long labels to follow, and it's still causing injury, and it's really frustrating to see it come back.
Back on the farm in eastern Illinois, Johnson says he's sympathetic to those with concerns about dicamba. He and his neighbors plant dicamba-resistant soybeans in adjacent fields to avoid drift problems. To him, the key comes down to communication.
And I think we're getting better to that, but up until that point, I don't think everybody was having a conversation. We wave at each other, stuff like that, as neighbors, but you got to have those conversations. Now, nobody loves those conversations, but you got to have those conversations.
Johnson says he wishes there was a better chemical to use, but for now, they have to work with what they have. I'm Will Bauer, Harvest Public Media.
Harvest Public Media is a collaboration of public media newsrooms in the Midwest and Great Plains, including the Texas Standard. Audience and engagement editor Wells Dunbar joins us now with a first look at the talk of Texas on this Monday. Happy Monday, Wells.
Happy Monday to you as well, David. Well, here's the question. What's the most unforgettable natural experience you've had in Texas? Yes, inspired by the arrival of summer, we're thinking about the outdoors impact on us. Maybe it's been watching a massive thunderstorm roll in, or maybe coming face to face with wildlife you weren't expecting. Been there a couple times. Or even taking a trip to an unbelievable swimming hole or rounding a bend in the road to discover a breathtaking view. Whatever it was, we want to hear the story in your own words. It's easy enough to do. Just grab your smartphone, head to texasstandard.org, tap the record button, and tell us about that unforgettable moment outdoors in Texas, because we are looking to share your story on air later this week as part of the Talk of Texas. Again, that's texasstandard.org/talk. And we can't wait to hear your story. We're already beginning to hear from plenty of folks about that stuff, so I'll be back with more of what our friends and listeners are already sharing later in the show. Again, but get that voicemail in at texasstandard.org/talk. I'll be back with more later in the show, David.
Wells Dunbar with the Talk of Texas. You know, back in the 50s and 60s, Texas first waged war against the New World screwworm and won, at least for a while. As you may have heard, they're back, but the winners of wars have a funny way of rewriting our memory. Take the lowly fire ant. We'll talk about that as the Standard continues.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Good Spread, an Austin-based mineral sunscreen brand seeking to make clean, reef-safe SPF for everybody under the sun. Now at H-E-B stores across Texas. More at goodspreadsuncare.com. Support for Texas Standard comes from H-E-B and the My H-E-B app, which is available for download, and shopping fresh departments like seafood, produce, bakery, and deli, and scheduling curbside pickup or home delivery. More at HEB.com.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. As you've likely heard by now, the New World screwworm is back in Texas. Agricultural leaders warned these parasitic flies could harm pets and ravage the state's cattle industry. But Texas has been through this before, and not just with screwworms, with lots of invasive species. KUT's Katie McAfee has a story of how scientists reined in one pest that many people might not realize as invasive, which posed a real threat.
It was the early 1990s. Research scientist Rob Plows was driving a rental van down I-35. He had precious cargo in the back seat, plastic trays filled with hundreds of thousands of red imported fire ants.
And suddenly I put my hand the back of my neck and I realized that all the fire ants had escaped out of the trays and they were all swarming on the inside of the truck.
Plows had made this trip many times before, and he had a contingency plan for this sort of thing. If there was a small escape, he'd use a little bit of ethanol to kill any ants that got out. Only, this wasn't a small escape. He had to douse the whole van.
The problem was that after 5 minutes of spraying with alcohol, I had consumed more alcohol than the ants had. So I had to sleep at the side of the road until I felt good enough to be able to drive back.
He took it easy for a few hours, and then cleaned the van out as best he could. But fire ants are extremely hard to get rid of. So when it was time to return the van to the rental place,
the guy came out to have a look and check the mileage and everything, and there was still ants just pouring out of the air vents and things.
Plows may have caused a fire ant infestation, but he was actually trying to prevent them. He was one of the few scientists at UT Austin's Breckenridge Field Laboratory working to eradicate them in the 80s and 90s. Because fire ants might seem as Texan as two-step, but they're actually invasive. They first arrived on a ship from South America to Mobile, Alabama in the 1930s. Back then, sailors used dirt to keep ships balanced when they were traveling without cargo. When they unloaded the dirt, they unknowingly deposited hundreds, maybe thousands, of what would later be named the red imported fire ant onto and into American soil. From there, they began a relentless migration across the American South. Within a few decades, they made it to Texas, much to the chagrin of ranchers, homeowners, and anyone walking barefoot.
A tiny ant called the fire ant, because of its sickening sting, has become a big problem for Texans.
At that point, in the 1980s, fire ants were a big thing in the news. People were running for Texas Ag Commissioner on the platform of let's eradicate fire ants.
That's Larry Gilbert, a professor of integrative biology at UT. He says in South America, fire ants evolved alongside natural predators to keep them in check. But they had no natural enemies in the U.S., so they spread across Texas like syrup on a plate, killing baby cattle, spoiling crops, and shorting out electrical equipment.
Not to mention the fact that a certain fraction of the population are just deathly allergic to fire ants.
A very small fraction, less than 0.1%, according to the National Library of Medicine. But the threat was enough for Texas leaders to wage war against fire ants. They set up quarantine sites. They encouraged residents to douse fire ant mounds with insecticides and report sightings to their county health department. Texas spent more than $1 billion a year fighting them, according to one estimate. None of it was working. Gilbert says it felt like you could walk across Texas on fire ant mounds, a genetic mutation that researchers believe occurred after red imported fire ants came to the U.S. made them particularly hard to eradicate.
We had a form of the fire ant, which is the multiple queen form, where you can have as many as 100 queens or more in a colony.
These queens are constantly reproducing, laying over 1,000 eggs a day in some cases. The population spread too fast to be tamed with chemicals. Even if the pesticides worked, Gilbert says it wouldn't have been a long-term solution. They caused too much harm to the rest of the ecosystem. Gilbert wanted to find a sustainable solution.
And so the next step was, let's go to South America and see why these things aren't considered a pest there.
In the early 90s, Gilbert got on a plane to Brazil with Plows, the rental van guy, and a few other researchers. In the Brazilian countryside, they noticed something peculiar. Fire ants were still one of the dominant ants in the ecosystem.
But in a field the size of a football field, you might have 5 or 6 species of these little flies that attack the fire ants and cause great chaos.
The Great Chaos goes like this. A tiny fly swoops in, injects an egg into a fire ant, paralyzes it, and flies away. The egg hatches, and the larva eventually burrows into the ant's head falls off, and it dies. The flies don't just kill fire ants, they also make it more difficult for them to forage for food. Gilbert says the discovery was one of the first promising biological controls for the fire ant, and they had to take advantage of it. His team brought back several species of the flies to Austin. It took decades, but he says,
we've naturalized about 4 species of these flies in Texas, and most places you go, like if you go out here and kick a mound, you'll get 2 different species of the flies coming to attack the ants.
Gilbert can't say for sure if his research helped reduce the fire ant population in Texas, but he's pretty convinced.
We get congratulations from ranchers saying, wow, since the flies got here, I'm seeing more quail, or I'm starting to see lizards, I'm starting to see this and that.
He says fire ants aren't ravaging the state like they used to, but they'll never be fully eradicated from Texas. Attention has been turned to newer invasive pests. African grasses, the cactus moth, the New World screwworm. The only thing left to do is watch where you step. I'm Katie McAfee in Austin.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a Texas-based workers' compensation provider committed to providing care and support for injured employees. More at texasmutual.com/TexansDeliver.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Matt Harrop. Texas is leading the nation in proposed natural gas power plants built to serve AI data centers, according to a new report. Our Emmanuel Rivas reports the projection is raising concerns about pollution and public health.
Texas accounts for 32 proposed gas-fired power plants built to directly supply electricity to AI data centers, according to a new Environmental Integrity Project report. Jen Dugan with the EIP says the projects could increase greenhouse gas emissions and other air pollutants as electricity demand continues to grow.
Where data centers are built, they should be powered by clean energy, including solar farms and wind turbines with ample battery storage systems for when weather conditions are poor. They should not be powered with dirty gas or coal.
The report calls for more public oversight and renewable energy sources as projects move through the permitting process. I'm Emmanuel Rivas in Dallas.
Governor Abbott marked the one-year anniversary of the deadly Hill Country floods over the weekend by speaking to a gathering of people in Kerrville.
The names that we carry in our hearts today are not just names. They're fathers and mothers, children, neighbors, souls who love this place as much as we do. They must never be forgotten.
Abbott's speech was part of the remembrances to the victims killed during the July 4th floods. Of the 139 lives lost during the floods, 119 were from Kerr County. The Trump administration's immigration crackdown is taking a toll on many military veterans and their family members. Our Andrew Schneider reports that Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, appears to be showing little consideration of non-citizens' U.S. military service when pursuing enforcement actions.
Federal law provides service members with an expedited path to U.S. citizenship, but they still need to take steps to apply. Sean Van Diver, a U.S. Navy veteran and veterans advocate, says many are now finding out they may have waited too long.
There used to be prior ICE guidance that treated military service as a significant mitigating factor in deciding whether or not to pursue enforcement. That doesn't mean anything anymore.
The Nonpartisan Migration Policy Institute estimates that as of 4 years ago, there were roughly 117,000 veterans in the U.S. who were neither native-born nor naturalized citizens. A spokesperson for the institute says that understates the number of people affected by the crackdown, which is also affecting non-citizen family members of veterans who are citizens. I'm Andrew Schneider in Houston.
And I'm Matt Harrop in the Texas Newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from University Extension at UT Austin, offering open enrollment to a wide variety of UT's undergraduate credit courses that can be taken by anyone from anywhere. More at extension.utexas.edu.
33 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time. I'm Laura Rice. It was a big weekend in World Cup play and a heartbreaking one for many fans. The All-Stars helped lead their teams to victory. France's Mbappe, Argentina's Messi, and Norway's Haaland are currently tied for the most number of 2026 World Cup goals at 7. Norway's win knocked out all-time champs Brazil. It was the last World Cup game for Brazilian star Neymar Jr., the all-time leading scorer for Brazilian men's soccer. Of course, some Texans have had a chance to see World Cup play close to home as Dallas and Houston have hosted games. Houston's home to one of the largest West African populations in the country. Houston Public Media's Sonia Kinyua explored how Houston's African diaspora is unifying around the game.
This is the moment Ghana scored the winning goal in its match against Panama. More than 50 Ghanaian fans at Bar Louie in Sugarland erupted into cheers.
Soccer is everything. It's a religion.
That's Moses Abuchi, a Ghana native who is now living in Houston. For him, this win is bigger than Ghana.
It doesn't matter whether Ghana is playing, if it's Nigeria is playing, Senegal is playing, you see the other African countries supporting each other.
It's a phenomenon that goes far beyond Houston. Nana Ozeapare, a historian of African history at Rice University, says it's a shared identity.
So there's a very strong sense of unity and Pan-African ideas when it comes to football.
Those sentiments are taking center stage this year. Africa made FIFA World Cup history this year when 10 nations qualified for the tournament. That includes Cape Verde, who made a stunning debut and surprised crowds when they tied with Spain, one of the top-ranked teams. For Nadine White, a Cape Verdean living in Houston, She says the game is finally putting her home on the map.
Just to know that a small country can definitely have big dreams, and we can make it no matter what. And it's amazing that this is our first time and we've gone so far.
For the last 3 World Cup tournaments, there have only been 5 African countries included. The jump in representation has been decades in the making. Back in 1966, the BBC reported Ghana led a unified boycott protesting FIFA's qualification rules. Until then, FIFA required African contenders to enter a playoff round against winners of Asia or Oceania in order to qualify for the tournament. The boycott finally gave Africa more seats at the table. But when you watch the tournament today, African talent isn't isolated to those national teams. It's everywhere. And Oze Apari says for fans, heritage is the thread that connects them to the players.
When they see somebody who, let's just say, was born in Spain or born in England, but their grandparents can be traced to the continent, people on the continent say, oh, that's a Moroccan, that's a Ghanaian, that's a Malawian, because we believe that no matter how far removed you yourself might be physically from that place of home, that you are still one of us, you're still part of us.
Manasseh Kwete is a native of the Democratic Republic of Congo, now living in Dallas. I met him at the grand opening of the country's pop-up consulate. He says soccer connects many children of immigrants to home.
When you have a lot of African countries coming to the U.S., it allows a lot of Africans that have never been to Africa, and even African Americans, to just, pick a country, to cheer for, to laugh, to see all type of cultural things. So we are hoping it builds a lot more pride on the cultural heritage.
That pride goes beyond the pitch. For many Africans, the World Cup is a chance to change how the continent is often portrayed in the media. Here's Oze Apari again.
Oftentimes, Africa is portrayed as a place of squalor, disease, where everyone's trying to leave because everything is so terrible. But I think you look at soccer, when they cover national teams and they show the cities, they show the people happy, celebrating goals together, they show where players are from, the town, the community.
The sporting event becomes a global microphone. It's a sentiment echoed by Medard Makobi. Makobi is also a Democratic Republic of Congo native who lives in Indiana. He traveled to Houston for the game.
It's bigger than the game. The game, we enjoy it, but I think the game gives us a chance to have a voice that we don't have when it comes to politics. The game just opens up more doors for the rest of us.
A voice, he says, that doesn't need translation.
Everybody speaks a different language, and I think soccer is a language that connects all of us.
I'm Sonia Kinua in Houston.
Morocco and Egypt now remain Africa's teams in World Cup play. Meanwhile, there's international controversy over the U.S. men's national team. We discussed on The Standard last week how the team would be missing top scorer Folarin Balogun in its next match. He received a red card and was sent off the pitch and given a one-game suspension, something that's long been part of FIFA's rules. But on Sunday, that decision was reversed after President Trump made a call to FIFA's president. It's the first time this type of World Cup suspension has been overturned in more than 6 decades. Trump praised FIFA on social media for reversing what he called a great injustice. The U.S. plays Belgium today at 7 Central. We'll be following along here on the Texas Standard.
Support for Texas Standard comes from UT San Antonio, a Carnegie Tier 1 public research institution, and designated as Texas's National Institute on Aging Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. More at utsa.edu. Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Realtors, providing representation at every stage of the home ownership journey, helping clients understand their options and manage complex transaction details. Info at texasrealestate.com.
You've got it tuned to the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. Vogue Magazine, as you probably know, highlights fashion, beauty, and culture. Celebrities including Zendaya, Harry Styles, and Beyoncé have all graced the cover. In Vogue Magazine's summer issue, out now, a feature called Lone Star State of Mind, Snapshots of Texas Today, highlights rodeo riders, ranchers, church choirs, cowboys, marching bands, and many more aspects of Texas. It's part of the issue's celebration of America's 250th anniversary. Naomi Elisee is Fashion Market Director for Vogue. Naomi, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. I'm so happy to be on.
And Morgan Sinesi is Vogue's Global Talent Director. Morgan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us. This is wonderful.
All right, the first couple of questions I have here are sort of a jump ball. So why Texas?
We kind of started this journey about exploring America and the 250th anniversary this summer. And we started honestly with like 5 states, and we were going to do a road trip and hit a bunch of different notes. And as we did more and more research about places, people, things that we could find, we kind of like honed into Texas, and it became the only state we covered and the entire basis of the story.
What was it about Texas that you think sort of needed the most attention?
I mean, definitely the multiculturalism that exists there. I'm from Texas. I'm from San Antonio, and me and a few other people that were involved in this that know the state well were able to kind of talk through. There's these different pockets that exist, these really large cities that exist, but that are also so different and offer so many different things. And so with that, our exploration kind of just continued to grow, and we started finding all these different people and places to highlight.
Morgan, can you explain the process of selecting people for projects? I mean, in this, some are models, others are related to models, others are just everyday Texans.
For this one particularly, we were looking for models who were from Texas, Erin Wasson being one of them, who is a veteran model who has been in this industry for years and is very open about her relationship with Texas, being from outside of Dallas and loving her relationship with the state and her city, and, living anywhere from New York to Paris to most recently the south of France, but always returning home to Texas. And so those particular stories were important. Sarah Grace is another woman who's in the story who's from Texas, was kind of plucked out of obscurity there, and so has a good story to tell. And Ruth as well, with her family, first generation immigrants living in Dallas, had a really important story to tell as well.
I want to ask about one specific photo of Ruth and her family. You took them to the sort of the borderlands area around Big Bend National Park, and there's the family in the Rio Grande, right? Can you talk about that moment? I mean, that might not have been part of their physical journey, but what did it mean to have them there as immigrants themselves?
I think it's a very sensitive subject, but a very important one. We all know what's happening at the border, and for a family like that, feels at home and feels like this is where they belong and where their place is, to get closer and closer to actually such a majestic and beautiful place, but also have to think about all these other things that are existing and happening around there that maybe pertains to them and their family, was a bittersweet moment for everyone, I think.
Just Ruth and her family, and just how her presence just quietly carries that story of what Morgan is saying of the Sudanese diaspora, and also just immigration in this country, while also having it at Big Bend, where so many of these national parks are just being stripped of their resources. It really is able to cover both of these topics in a way that felt very true. It just felt so powerful, but also when you look at the video of Ruth with her family and just how beautifully connected they are, it just feels like such an honest weave into the story and speaks back to the Texan culture.
Well, Naomi, we can't talk to Vogue and not talk about the fashion. Can you talk about the wardrobe, the dresses, and the other materials that you selected for this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a lot of this it relied to knowing who the talent was. So who's going to be the characters casted here, and how do we want to portray them? And Carlos had a pretty strong vision of ensuring, Carlos Nazario, the stylist of the shoot, had a strong vision of ensuring that the characters, the people, the real Texans, the real talent that were being featured were just like an elevated version of themselves. It's still capturing the essence of who they are and what they represent, but also making a statement with the designers that we use. So all of the summer issue featured American designers. You get to layer in designers that speak to the zeitgeist of America right now, and that's someone like a Willie Shavaria, Rachel Scott, and Emily Bodie. It then ties back all of the fashion to the same idea of like bringing it back to how Texans are prideful, they're culturally rich, they're talented. It anchors them to be the center of the story, while then keeping them elevated through the clothes that they're wearing on their bodies.
Well, you write Texas is rewriting the American narrative. How would you all describe that?
I just say we didn't want to illustrate an idea of Texas as just the idea. We wanted to really document the people that were actually living it, right? Different backgrounds, different talents, what they bring into the richness of the history of Texas. It's really about the people who are quietly, authoring what America looks like right now. You have the TSU marching band, the ranchers, the designers, the Black cowboys, all of these people that you could put it all in one frame, and then you're not just looking at one stereotype, you're looking at America. And that's really what Texas represents, because it's such a brilliant state where you can have so many different creatives and different people in it that are then, creating their own stories.
Anything you'd add, Morgan?
Again, being from Texas, there's such a stereotype, I would say, that exists. Even some of our team members who took this trip with us were kind of like, I would never think I necessarily wanted to be in Texas or visit Texas. And I promised them they would have a different opinion when they left this shoot. And they did. We have a history of being a certain way, even though other things existed. It was very one note for a long time. But I think what's happening in Texas is changing every day. The culture's changing every day, and it's a great place. That's the way I always describe it.
I love Texas. My husband's from Texas. A lot of
Wait, I didn't know that.
people.
Where's he from? Oh, I didn't know. Amazing.
Texas touches everybody in a lot of ways.
It really does. All roads lead back to Texas.
It
Exactly.
Naomi Elisee is Fashion Market Director for Vogue, and Morgan Sinesi is Vogue's Global Talent Director. This feature in the magazine's summer issue is called Lone Star State of Mind, Snapshots of Texas Today. Thank you both again for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for having
great.
us. Yeah, this is nice.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Casa. For a child in foster care, small moments today can have a big impact tomorrow. More on how lending time and support can help make a difference at becomeacasa.org.
Hey, what's cooking? Make sure to join us as we check in with Texas's top taco journalists to hear about the latest innovation stories and the people behind many a Texan's favorite go-to. It's Mondo Rayo with the Tacos of Texas, Thursday on the Texas Standard.
Support for Tacos of Texas comes from H-E-B.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. A year ago, on July 4th, a group of protesters gathered outside an ICE facility in Prairie Land in North Texas. They chanted and shot off fireworks, which they said were meant to support those detained inside. At least 2 people damaged cars and spray-painted structures within the property, but the incident escalated when one among the group fired a gun at an Alvarado police lieutenant, hitting the officer in the shoulder. In recent weeks, 9 people have been sentenced for the incident. Here to tell us more, Toluwani Osabamowo, who has been following this issue for our partner station KERA in North Texas. Toluwani, welcome back.
Hey there.
Can you give us the rundown of these charges and the sentences so far?
Yes, so the shooter in this case, Benjamin Song, was convicted of attempted murder along with some firearms charges, and then along with several other defendants convicted of rioting, providing material support to terrorism, use of an explosive, and conspiracy to use an explosive. And in this case, the explosive was fireworks. And so that got Song 100 years in prison. For other people who didn't pull guns but were at Prairie Land or involved in planning, they got up to 70. Meanwhile, we had some guilty plea defendants who got up to 15 years. But the youngest defendant, who did damage property at Prairie Land but pleaded guilty, got just 22 months.
Some critics have felt that the charges and the sentences are intense. What have you been hearing from experts about the judge's choices here?
One of the first comparisons that we saw in terms of how this case was going to be prosecuted was to January 6th. And one of the defendant's attorneys at sentencing did bring up the sentences of those arrested at January 6th. The longest sentence there, as we might recall, was 22 years for Enrique Tarrio, the former leader of the Proud Boys. And he was later pardoned pretty soon after President Trump took office for his second term. Supporters and attorneys of the defendants have certainly criticized this prosecution and their sentences as being egregiously long and as a form of political prosecution for specifically their left-wing beliefs. Terrorism charges tend to bump up the potential sentence that someone can face. And so because they were convicted of that charge, even though it didn't necessarily have anything to do with belonging to a specific terrorist group or believing in a certain belief, that automatically made the sentences for these folks a lot graver.
I've heard it said that this case was unique in how the government pursued accusations of Antifa membership for the accused. Could you explain that and how that has played into the sentencing so far, according to experts?
Well, authorities have argued since the beginning that this was a coordinated attack and an ambush motivated by the defendant's anti-ICE, anti-Trump, and generally anti-government beliefs that has been put under this umbrella of the term Antifa or anti-fascist. While this case was going on, Trump designated Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization, which is something that's never been done before. And then these defendants were charged with that providing material support to terrorism charge, which, like I said, legally does not have much to do with the Antifa argument. Then you fast forward to trial. The government presented literature, posters, weapons, and other gear recovered that they say proved that this was a group of far-left militants. And then, of course, defense attorneys argued that Antifa is an ideology, not a group someone can be a part of. But the jury did convict on that providing material support to terrorism charge. That conviction was key to ensuring that sentencing was a little bit heavier for folks because it is a terrorism charge on paper.
What about appeals? What are you hearing on that front?
Yeah, so at least 5 defendants have now appealed, including Song, the shooter. They are appealing to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which has several Trump appointees, and legal observers have regarded it as one of the most conservative federal appeals courts in the country. Everyone is kept pretty quiet about on what grounds they will appeal, but we already know that certain turning points in the trial, like the mistrial during jury selection and the judge barring Song from using the self-defense argument during trial, will probably feature in their argument and reasons why these folks want their convictions overturned.
Tolawani Osibamowo reports for our partners at KERA North Texas. Tolawani, thanks so much for the update.
Thank you.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. You know what that signal means, right? Our audience and engagement editor, Wells Dunbar, is back with more of the Talk of Texas. Interesting subject this week, Wells.
Yeah, we're definitely having some fun with this one because, summer has a way of getting us outside. We're talking days at the river, long drives down a country road, all those things that can translate into one of those Texas moments you never forget. That's what we're talking about this week with the Talk of Texas. What are the most unforgettable natural experiences you've had in Texas? And we're getting some good responses across a couple of different platforms. Posted this one up to Reddit as well and getting some interesting responses there. One Redditor gives us a nice rundown of their favorite places, including Big Bend, the Hill Country, the Piney Woods, and next up, Palo Duro. Another Liz and Redditor shares a fascinating, great memory here from a first visit to East Texas. They recall the first time they drove into Martin Dees Jr. State Park. The Redditor says, I'm from San Antonio, and I'd never been to that part of Texas. I think we're talking East Texas here. The forests, swamps, and wildlife just intrigued me. The first thing I saw when we pulled into our campsite, a gator swimming right behind it. It was a wonderful week, and I didn't want to leave. I think some people might feel a little differently once that gator got spotted. But yeah, I mean, that one's, as a Central Texas and East and West Texas kid myself, I've never really experienced that whole like Piney Woods vibe. So that does sound fascinating. And just a reminder.
Stay with you.
Yeah. A reminder of just like the crazy diversity of natural experiences we do have. So we're looking to hear about those moments in the outdoors you don't forget. We're talking thunderstorms, wildlife encounters, swimming holes, of course. We've got our reservation to the Blue Hole coming up here this summer, of course, as well. So excited about that one. So we're just looking to hear whatever you got to say about this topic, because there is a lot and it's a fun one. So easy enough to do here. Record your story at texasstandard.org/talk, because we are looking to share it on air. Just go there on your smartphone, press that record button, put the phone up to your head, and just tell us. Let her rip. Tell us about your most, fascinating moments there in the outdoors in Texas. And it could really be, any number of things. There's so many beautiful moments, but, for me, I'm thinking about like that drive up I-10 back and forth to El Paso and Austin. Just that crazy scenery, the clouds and the mountains. Impeccable stuff. So lots to choose from. Again, go there to texasstandard.org/talk.
Audience and engagement editor Wells Dunbar with the Talk of Texas. This state's known as a place where people come to start over, new beginnings and all. What if the best way to start over was just to dive in? After years as a full-time caregiver, one woman set herself an unusual challenge: 50 swims before her 50th birthday. We'll hear from the author of Midstream on the next Texas Standard. Hope you can join us.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Round Rock ISD Virtual Academy, offering virtual and hybrid classes for self-motivated high schoolers throughout Texas, with more than 50 courses, including advanced placement and dual credits. roundrockisd.org/virtual academy. Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Woldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family.